in this module, we will study the control of cell division. How the biological cells, they are control their cell division, their propagation, their increase in number, which is very important. Now, one thing is very interesting that before a cell, it becomes too large, ये बहुत बड़ा हो जाता है, it divides producing two daughter cells. One has to think that why two daughter cells? Why not three daughter cells? So this is a food for thought. Now each daughter cell is an exact replica of the parent cell. जो इसका parent cell है वो उसका exact replica होता है. And before the cell divide, cell division से पहले क्या होता है? DNA is replicated. The DNA, which is the source of genetic material, which hosts all the information for the cell, so it divides first, then the daughter cells are produced. Now the size of an organ, देखें ना, cells जो हैं, they can occur in two types. One is unicellular, or they can occur in an organ, जिसमें के multicellular होता है. तो जो cells in an organ or organism, that depends on its total cell mass. कि उसका cell mass, उसका cell या उसका वजन कितना है, which depends on both क्या है, total number of cells and their size. कि उसमें cell के कितने number हैं and cell का size क्या है. Cell number in turn depend on the amount of cell division and the cell death. जाहिर है कि whenever in the organ there are two processes which are going side by side. One is the production of the cells and the second one is the death of the cell or the death rate, and that becomes the total, the net is the cell number increase. Organ and body size is determined by three fundamental processes. उसके basic बुनियादी जो नुकात हैं वो हैं सेल ग्रोथ, उसकी ग्रोथ क्या है, सेल डिवीजन, उसकी डिवीजन क्या है, एंड देन इज द सेल सर्वाइवल. ऑफ कोर्स कि वो कितने सर्वाइव करते हैं, यानी उनमें डेथ रेट जो है, द ग्रोथ माइनस द डेथ रेट, दैट इज द सेल सर्वाइवल. ये तीन फैक्टर हैं जिनके ऊपर ये डिपेंड करता है. द एक्स्ट्रा सेलुलर मॉलिक्यूल्स दैट रेगुलेट the cell growth division and survival are generally soluble secreted protein. ये किस तरह होता है? There are soluble secreted protein because the cell जो है इसको खुद तो नहीं पता चलता. It has to get some signals, some ideas from somewhere, and in the biological system, as we have noted earlier, the proteins, they are the major key role player. वो बहुत key role play करते हैं in that, and these soluble proteins, they bound to the surface of the cell. ये cell की surface के ऊपर चमड़ जाती हैं, bound कर जाती हैं, and then they indicate or they put the signals for the cell to divide. Cell को बताने के लिए कि भाई now is the time to divide. No, you have to divide. Now these extracellular signal molecules can be divided into three classes. ये तीन classes, तीन इसके ग्रुप हैं जिनमें ये होते हैं. एक है माइटोजेंस, एक है ग्रोथ फैक्टर ऑफ कोर्स, एंड देन देयर इज ए सर्वाइवल फैक्टर, जो कि सेल की जो एक्स्ट्रा सेलुलर सिग्नल मॉलिक्यूल जो हैं वो उनको कंट्रोल करते हैं. केमिकल सब्सटेंसेस which stimulate the cell division by triggering a wave of G1S CDK activity, and it activates the mitosis. देखिए ना, mitosis जो है, that is the process where the cell division occurs. And the chemical substances which stimulate the cell division, जैसे कि हमने we have seen in the previously, these are the proteins. Mitogens also reveal intracellular negative control. माइटोजन जो हैं वो इंट्रासेलुलर नेगेटिव कंट्रोल जो है उसको कंट्रोल करते हैं। ये भी है कि ये तो नहीं कि सेल में ग्रोथ शुरू हुई और वो जनाब सेल सब बढ़ते ही गए। नो, देयर हैज़ टू बी कंट्रोल, देयर हैज़ टू बी ऑर्गेनाइज, एंड दीज आर द mitogens. Now, mitogens stimulate the cell growth, that is the increase in cell mass, by promoting the synthesis of proteins and other macromolecules. जाहिर है कि ये प्रमोट करेंगे सिंथेसिस ऑफ प्रोटीन्स, वो प्रोटीन जो कि रिस्पॉन्सिबल है फॉर द सेल ग्रोथ, एंड देन दे इनहिबिटिंग देयर डिग्रेडेशन। एट द सेम टाइम दे विल इनहिबिट, वो उसको रोकेंगे कि उनकी डेग्रेडेशन ना हो, वो डिग्रेड ना हो। And this process, it promotes the cell survival by suppressing the form of programmed cell death, which is known as apoptosis. Remember, the cells, once they grow, they divide, they have also undergo a death process. And that is a programmed death process. ये नहीं कि जनाब in organ, all the cells, they divide suddenly, they die suddenly, or they produce too much overweight or things like this. But there is a programmed growth and there is a programmed death, which is known the process by the apoptosis. Now, limited nutrients and the growth factor, they inhibit the cell division naturally, because the limited growth factor अगर हैं, limited nutrient हैं, तो cell won't grow. However, G1 phase is a key period in the control of cell division. In the cell division, the G1, that is the process or the gap between the mitosis and meiosis, that is a very, very important period for the cell growth or cell division. Now, chemical checkpoints, they laid in the G1 just before DNA synthesis, which is called S phase, which is earlier in the earlier modules, and that is a greater importance in this regard. Again, the G1 just before DNA synthesis. Remember, as we studied previously, that before the cell divide, DNA synthesis occurs, and then the DNA divides like that, and that is very important in this regard. Now, the unicellular organism, there are different type of organism. A unicellular like bacteria, yeast, and like this. And the unicellular organism, they tend to grow and divide as fast as they can. उनमें कोई इतना कंट्रोल नहीं है. But the multicellular organism, जो कि ज़्यादा सेल से कंपोज होते हैं, however, they divide only when the organism needs more cell. Otherwise, the cells or the organism, if the cell continue to grow, the organism, it becomes very large, just like think of a liver or other kidneys or things like this. But there, the cell divide only when the organism needs more cell. For an animal cell to proliferate, animal cells किस तरह grow करते हैं? It must receive stimulatory extracellular signals in the form of mitogen. जिस तरह हमने पहले we have seen earlier that these are the compounds, the chemicals, the proteins which give the signal to the cell, and they are on the surface of the cells. One of the first mitogen to be identified was a platelet-derived growth factor, that PDGF. And PDGF is only one of our 50 animal proteins that has been recognized or that are known to act as mitogens. Now, epidermal growth factor, EGF, it acts not only on epidermal cell. There are different types of cell. One is the epidermis, which are on the skin or things this. But there are so many other cell types, including both epithelial and the non-epithelial cells, where all these factors, they act together and control the cell division.